Welcome to the deep dive. You know how it works? We sift through piles of information, research, articles, notes, all that stuff, and pull out what really matters for you.
Exactly.
Today, we're digging into AbbVie's first quarter 2025 results. We've gone through the press release, earnings call, CEO, CFO comments, analyst Q&A, market reactions, the whole lot. And the mission is simple. Give you a clear, concise take on AbbVie's performance, what's driving growth, where they're headed, without all the dense financial jargon.
Yeah, think of it as the key insights distilled. We want to give you that focused perspective on how AbbVie started the year, not just raw numbers, but what they mean.
Right. What's the story behind the figures? How's leadership spinning it? And what are the experts saying? Basically, how's AbbVie doing now and setting up for the future?
Precisely.
Okay, so let's get started. The big picture first. How did AbbVie actually do in Q1 2025?
Well, overall, it was a solid start. They reported net revenues of $13.343 billion. That's an 8.4% increase compared to last year.
Yeah, 8.4%. And they also mentioned operational increase. I saw 9.8% there too.
Ah, right. Good point. So operational growth basically takes out the effect of, currency exchange rates moving around.
Right, the fluctuations.
Exactly. So while the number they have to report is 8.4%, the sort of underlying business growth, ignoring currency swings, was closer to that 9.8%. It gives a slightly cleaner look at just the business itself.
Gotcha. Makes sense. And profitability. How did earnings per share look?
So there are two main ways to look at it. On a GAAP basis, that's the standard accounting rules diluted EPS was $0.72. That was actually down 6.5%.
Yeah, okay.
But analysts often focus more on the adjusted EPS. This pulls out certain items like one-off costs or non-cash things to try and show the, let's say, core operational profit.
Yeah,
that adjusted number was $2.46 per share, which was up 6.5%. So kind of the opposite direction.
Interesting. Why the difference?
Well, they did mention that adjusted figure included a $1.13 hit per share from acquiring some research and development projects, IP&D, and milestone payments. Stuff like that gets excluded in the adjusted view.
Okay, so gap down, adjusted up. Did this performance change their outlook for the whole year then?
Yes, it did. Seems like the strong start gave them confidence. They raised their full year 2025 guidance for that adjusted diluted EPS. The new range is $12.09 to $12.29.
And revenues?
Revenues, too. They bumped up the full year forecast by a pretty significant $700 million. Now they're expecting around $59.7 billion for the year.
All right, so overall, sounding pretty positive, boosting guidance. Let's zoom in a bit. Immunology is usually their biggest area, right? How did that perform?
Huge. Immunology global net revenues were $6.264 billion. That's up 16.6% reported, or 18.1% operationally.
Wow, okay.
And within that, the real stars were, unsurprisingly, Skyrizi and Rinvoq. Their growth was, well, pretty remarkable.
Yeah, those are the big ones replacing Humira, essentially. What were the numbers for Skyrizi?
Skyrizi was explosive. Global net revenues hit $3.425 billion. That's a 70.5% increase, 70%.
70. Goodness. That's massive.
It really is. It signals a major shift, like maybe a new standard of care physicians and patients are really grabbing onto. Because of that, they raised Skyrizi's full-year forecast by $600 million, now expecting $16.5 billion from it this year.
And where's that growth coming from specifically?
Management pointed to strong performance in psoriasis, obviously, but also inflammatory bowel disease, IBD. They said they're capturing roughly 1 out of every 2 new or switching Crohn's disease patients in the U.S.
1 in 2. That's incredible market share.
It is, and leading share in U.S. ulcerative colitis too, plus new psoriasis patients in nearly 30 countries. It's really taking off globally.
Okay, Skyrizi is clearly a powerhouse. What about Rinvoq?
Rinvoq, also very strong, $1.718 billion in global net revenues. That's up 57.2%. So also stellar growth.
And guidance for Rinvoq.
Also raised, up by $300 million to $8.2 billion for the full year. They mentioned growth across rheumatology, dermatology, and IBD again. For ulcerative colitis in the U.S., they said it's capturing about 1 in 3 in-play patients.
1 in 3. Still very strong.
Definitely. And they got European approval for a new indication, giant cell arteritis, GCA, expecting FDA approval soon, too. So more potential growth areas opening up.
So Skyrizi and Rinvoq are just firing on all cylinders, really driving that immunology growth. But the flip side, Humira, the old blockbuster.
Yeah, Humira. As everyone expected, really. The biosimilar competition is hitting hard. Global net revenues were $1.121 billion, which is down 50.6%.
Oof, over a 50% drop.
Yep. And because of that, they had to lower the U.S. Humira guidance for the year cut it by $500 million, down to $3.5 billion now. The erosion is happening a bit faster than they thought.
Wow. It really is a changing of the guard, isn't it? The speed of that shift is something.
Absolutely. Skyrizi and Rinvoq are definitely stepping up to fill that gap, and then some, based on these numbers.
Okay. Let's shift gears. What about neuroscience? That's another big pillar for them.
Neuroscience also had a good quarter. Global net revenues reached $2.282 billion. That's up 16.1%.
Solid growth.
Yeah, and they're projecting this whole segment will hit around $10 billion in revenue for the full year 2025. So they're clearly confident it'll keep growing.
And what specific drugs are driving that?
Well, Vraylar, for mental health conditions, brought in $765 million, up about 10.3%. Botox Therapeutic, this is for medical uses like migraine, spasticity, that was strong too. $866 million, up nearly 16%.
Okay.
In fact, they raised the Botox Therapeutic full-year forecast by $100 million, up to $3.6 billion globally.
Nice. What about the migraine drugs, Ubrelvy and Qulipta?
Both growing well. Ubrelvy revenues were $240 million, up almost 18%. Qulipta was $193 million, but that was up nearly 48%.
48% for Qulipta. That's quick growth.
It is, and together, those oral CGRPs, they call them, led AbbVie to raise the combined forecast by $100 million, now expecting $2.2 billion from them this year.
So pretty broad strength across neuroscience. Anything else notable there? Any pipeline news?
Yeah, a couple of things. VLF, it's a treatment for advanced Parkinson's disease. It brought in $63 million globally. They said uptake is strong, especially Japan and Europe, and early feedback in the U.S. is positive.
Okay.
And they're also progressing tavapadon, another Parkinson's drug candidate. They expect to submit that for regulatory approval later this year, so potentially more growth coming in neuroscience down the line.
All right. Neuroscience looking solid. Let's move to oncology. How did cancer drugs perform?
Oncology reported global net revenues of $1.633 billion. That's up 5.8%. So growth, but maybe a bit more mixed within the portfolio compared to immunology or neuroscience.
Okay, 5.8%. Break that down for us. What were the key movers?
Well, Imbruvica, which has been a big earner but faces competition, saw revenues decline. $738 million, down about 11.9%.
Down almost 12%.
Okay, but interestingly, they actually raised the full-year forecast for Imbruvica by $100 million up to $2.8 billion. So it seems like the decline might be slower than they initially feared.
Huh. That is interesting. Less erosion than expected, maybe.
Seems like it. Now, Venclexta, another key cancer drug that grew, $665 million in revenue, up 8.3%, and its forecast was also raised by $100 million to $2.7 billion for the year.
Okay, so Venclexta doing well. What about the newer oncology assets? Elahere.
Right, Elahere. That's for a type of ovarian cancer. It brought in $179 million globally. They highlighted more positive trial data, the Mirasol trial showing significant improvements in survival for patients, plus international launches are ramping up.
Good momentum there. Any others?
Epkinly, another recent approval, generated $51 million, and they mentioned a new collaboration with a company called Xilio Therapeutics, aiming to develop novel cancer immunotherapies.
Pipeline activity.
Yeah, and speaking of pipeline, they anticipate getting accelerated FDA approval in Q2, so pretty soon, for Teliso-V. That's for a specific type of non-small cell lung cancer. And they're also making progress with their next-gen ADCs antibody-drug conjugates. Things like Temab-A and ABBV-706. These are sort of targeted chemo delivery systems.
Lots happening in oncology then, even if the overall growth number wasn't as high as other segments. Seems like a lot of future potential being built.
Definitely a lot of moving parts and pipeline focus there.
Okay, let's cover the last major segment, aesthetics. This area has faced some headwinds lately, hasn't it? How did AbbVie's aesthetics unit do?
Yeah, you're right. It's been tougher for aesthetics across the industry, and AbbVie saw that too. Global net revenues were $1.102 billion, which was down 11.7%.
Down almost 12%.
Correct. They pointed specifically to, economic headwinds, people maybe pulling back on spending for elective procedures like Botox or fillers.
Makes sense. Did that impact their forecast?
It did. They lowered the global sales forecast for the whole aesthetics segment down to $5.1 billion for the year.
Which products were hit hardest? Botox Cosmetic and Juvederm, I assume?
Exactly. Botox Cosmetic revenues were $556 million, down 12.3%. Its guidance was lowered by about $100 million. And Juvederm, the filler line, saw an even steeper drop, $231 million in revenue, down 22.2%. Its guidance was also cut by around $100 million.
Ouch. So, clear impact from the economy there. Despite those challenges, are they still innovating or investing in aesthetics?
Yes, actually. Some interesting things happening. They submitted an application, a BLA, to the FDA for a new neurotoxin. It's called trinobotulinum toxin, or BoNT for short.
Another Botox-like product.
Sort of, but potentially with a different profile. They're positioning it for glabellar lines, those lines between the eyebrows, and highlighting potentially faster onset and shorter duration than traditional Botox. Could be for different uses or patient preferences.
Interesting. Quick in, quick out, maybe.
Perhaps. And they've also started a clinical program looking at using this new BoNT together with Botox, co-administration.
Okay. Combining effects.
Could be. And on the investment side, their Allergan Medical Institute, which trains doctors and nurses on aesthetic procedures, is opening 3 new training centers in the U.S. So they're still investing in the underlying market infrastructure and education, suggesting they see long-term potential despite the current dip.
Right, playing the long game even with current softness. Okay, so we've covered the main divisions. Were there any other big announcements or key developments from the quarter?
A few other notable things, yeah. On the leadership front, Robert Michael, the current CEO, will also become chairman of the board starting in July 2025.
Okay.
Probably more strategically significant, though, was AbbVie officially entering the obesity treatment market.
Ah, right, the Gubra deal.
Exactly. They licensed a compound called GUB014295. AbbVie's calling it ABBV295. It's a long-acting amylin analog. Early phase 1 results looked positive.
Big move, given how hot the obesity market is.
Huge. It signals they're serious about getting into that space, diversifying beyond their traditional strengths. They explicitly said they plan further investment in obesity. Definitely one to watch.
Absolutely. Anything else?
They also got FDA approval for Ubrelvy, which is a new antibiotic for complicated intra-abdominal infections. And they announced a major commitment to U.S. manufacturing, planning to invest over $10 billion over the next 10 years.
Wow, $10 billion in U.S. manufacturing. Okay, so quite a few strategic moves alongside the core business performance.
Definitely. Building for the future in multiple ways.
So let's wrap this up, looking at the overall guidance and outlook again.
Right. So as we said, they raised the full-year adjusted EPS guidance and the overall revenue forecast, mainly driven by that outperformance from Skyrizi, Rinvoq, and also solid neuroscience growth.
And they provided those updated sales numbers for key drugs we discussed.
Correct. It's worth noting, though, what's not in the guidance yet. They mentioned it doesn't reflect any potential future tariffs on the pharma sector, should those happen.
Okay, important caveat.
And it also doesn't include the financial impact, like acquired R&D costs related to that Gubra obesity drug deal, because that deal actually closed after Q1 ended. So that'll likely show up in Q2 numbers.
Got it. But despite those unknowns, the overall tone from management seemed
pretty confident, very confident actually, about long-term growth. They reiterated their projection for a high single-digit compound annual growth rate for revenue right through 2029.
high single digits through 2029. That's a strong long-term outlook.
It is. They clearly believe the growth drivers, especially Skyrizi and Rinvoq, have long legs.
Okay, so summing it all up,
Yeah.
AbbVie kicks off 2025 strongly. Immunology is the star, with Skyrizi and Rinvoq just crushing it, really helping offset the expected Humira decline and also the current softness in aesthetics. Neuroscience looks solid, too.
Exactly. And they're making clear strategic bets on the future, entering obesity, investing heavily in R&D across oncology and neuroscience, and boosting manufacturing.
I think what really stands out, as you said, is just the sheer speed and market share grab by Skyrizi and Rinvoq. It's not just replacing Humira. It feels like they're reshaping that whole immunology treatment landscape.
Absolutely. The uptake is phenomenal and really speaks to the innovation hitting a significant unmet need, or at least a desire for better options.
So maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to mull over. Given these big strategic moves, like jumping into obesity, plus all the pipeline work, what other innovations or maybe even acquisitions might AbbVie pursue to lock in that long-term growth they're projecting?
Yeah, it makes you wonder how they'll continue to balance managing these huge, newer blockbusters like Skyrizi and Rinvoq while still making the big, potentially risky bets needed for the next wave of breakthroughs, right?
It's the perennial challenge for big pharma, isn't it? Fascinating stuff to watch.
It certainly is. Well, thanks for diving deep into AbbVie's Q1 with us.
Yeah, thanks for joining us for this analysis. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.